Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, and a very good day to all of you, my dear students. I welcome you to the 16th lecture of report writing skills. If you remember what we have discussed and what we have started in the previous lecture, number 15, its focus was writing a memorandum. And to initiate the discussion, we started with the basics of a memorandum, the basic concept, moving onwards to understanding the purpose of a memorandum, then an overview of how it is generally structured. That overview was essential in order to understand the basic types, because after all we shared the samples in the form of examples with reference to each and every type that we have studied in our previous lecture. Now you are well aware of the different categories based on the purpose and nature of the audience, the manner in which we classify these memorandum into different categories. Based on this knowledge, now we are in a position to move towards the next step, of course applying all those strategies which we have learned in the form of the writing process, as well as the 7 C's of communication. Now you know how you can apply it when the actual time is here of understanding the structure, the detailed structure, and the formatting of a memorandum. When I say the format, basically it's the outlook, the appearance, the manner in which it has to appear on a piece of paper or a document. This is basically the format, for which of course we have some templates, and if you have to write it in the form of a paper, then you should know the manner of spacing, the font size, the headings, the order of everything, the manner in which it should appear. We can also call it as the outer frame. And once we start the discussion of the inner structure, the detailed morphology of a memorandum, then we are going to look into each and every section in detail and what is supposed to be covered within those headings. Let us begin with the structure and format of a memorandum. Of course, we are going to start from the outer frame, and the outer frame means the appearance, what points are to be kept in mind while writing a memorandum. So if we look at the format and the points to be considered, usually and conventionally memorandums have 1-inch margins around the page. Around means in all the surroundings. This page margins option is always there, even if you talk about Microsoft Word document. Whenever you open up a document, you always have this option of view in which you simply set the page margin. In case if I give you my own example, we had some rules back in our own university as well, in which we had to prepare this dissertation, and in which from the left we had to keep it 1.5, from top 1, right 1, and bottom 1. So you have this space, you have this option of simply picking up the page margins using the option of custom, of course, and a similar way you have this option. You have to keep this in mind in case of using a page as well. Moving onwards, all lines of a memorandum begin at the left margin. So of course you can start from center, as we have some different forms of text, but in case of writing a memorandum, it has to initiate, it has to begin from the left. Every line. That's why all lines begin at the left margin. The text begins 2 spaces after the subject line. Now you have studied the different structure. Now we are going to study them in our today's lecture as well. But if you remember, to, from, date, and subject, once you have written the subject, then you're going to place 2 spaces, and then the text is going to begin by 2 spaces. In case of typing a memorandum, in case of a Word doc, you're going to click on enter twice, which means it's double spaced and then you start writing the actual content. The body of the memorandum is single spaced with 2 spaces between the paragraphs. As studied, of course, you write your content in the form of paragraphs. So in case of talking and referring to a single paragraph, the lines which would be coming and forming that paragraph, they should have this line spacing, which you call as the single spaced or a single enter. Whereas if you have to move towards the next paragraph, then double enter or double space to keep up the simple organized format in which you indicate by this double space that now one subject or one component of that memo is complete, and now we are moving towards the next one. The sender usually signs the memo using initials, first name or complete name, depending upon the situation. But in most circumstances and conventionally, once it's complete, the basic focus remains on the initial. You do the initial, not the complete signature. I'm not referring to complete signature. There is a difference between the initial and the signature. You're well aware of it. When you have to just provide a signal that, and you take the claim that this writing basically belongs to you, and for that purpose you provide just the initials. This is basically expected to be there in case of a memorandum. The second option, of course, is also pretty much available, that is of using your first name or complete name, depending upon the circumstances. What suits best is applied. Being aware of the practices of addressing and distributing memos in your organization. Now, this point is also very much important because you can have situations in which you have to decide whether to follow an alphabetical pattern of addressing your audience or just to place them based on the rank, moving from highest rank to lower ranks. So you have to decide what is the convention, what is the norm which is followed within your organization. So considering who should receive and in what order, for example, senior managers, for example, take precedence over the junior managers. So if that is the case, and if you have to move according to the ranks, you're going to start from the highest rank and then you'll be moving towards the lower ranks. And in case the rank doesn't apply, then of course you have this space of using the alphabetical order of the recipients by the last name. That becomes safe. So you have to focus on the last name, you call it at the surname. That becomes the determining factor of how to place them in an alphabetical order. Organization's name is usually contained within the letterhead. The letterhead, of course, is the template or the form of hard letter that you get, on which you basically provide a document, you place it in a printer, and then you get a printout of all that text which you have typed on a PC. The hard formed paper that you place, which has this logo of your organization along with its name at the background, basically is used. So this is basically called as the letterhead, and that is also used, and it has the organization's name. So that is also part of the convention in which you have to write the memorandum. Electronic copies of memorandum should not include the simulated initials, simulated or imitated or copied. So if you are providing an electronic copy of that memorandum, you are sharing it with the receivers or the addressee. Over here, the initials or their simulation is not essential. It's required within the original document which has been prepared by that person, and that is why his or her initial are essential to take the claim of that document produced or created or drafted by that individual. In case of additional pages, which was discussed in the previous lecture as well, there are situations in which your memorandum is not brief, and in those circumstances you basically move on to the next page, and then there are some rules, some norms to be followed, as we're going to study here. Memo of more than one page, let's say there are 2 pages. In that case, you have to use a header and carry at least 2 lines of the body text over to that page to develop that link and to move in the appropriate format. The format asks you to select the header, insert a header on your page 2, and within that header you have to provide some specific information. We'll discuss it as well, but below that header some part of your main body text should come to develop the link between page 1 and page 2. Now what should be there in case of your header? The header should include either the recipient's name or an abbreviated subject line, the page number and the date. You have the components. These are required in case of your header that you have placed at the top of your second page. Place the header in the upper left hand corner or across the page. Upper left hand corner as you have over here, whereas across the page the information is just moving across the page. As you have the name, you have the page number and then the date. So depends on the format which is being followed. Otherwise these are the formats which can be followed. You have the guidance and the instructions. Now once the outer frame has been set, you know all the rules to be followed while writing your content. Now you're going to move and start the actual exercise of preparing or drafting. And now look back at all the points which we have studied. So of course we talked about it, we discussed, you divide it in journal into a head and a body. So we're going to start and look into the basic head of your memorandum, and in that head you basically have to, from, date and subject. Let's discuss them one by one to get a clear idea how you write, what do you write in these headings. If we talk about this too, in case of informal memos, the receiver's given name, example Andy, is enough, because there are situations in which it becomes quite informal, whereas it could be formal as well. In case of point number 1, we are saying you have a situation in which it is informal. The given name, for example, even you can call it as first name, will suffice as well. But for more formal memos, use the receiver's full name. So it depends on the formality. If it is a situation in which formality is required, professionalism is really much essential, use full name. If the receiver is in another department, then there is a need, of course, of mentioning that department's name as well. Usually not necessary to use Mr., Mrs., Miss unless the memo is very formal. So it depends on the degree of formality, which determines to how much extent you have to provide the details. If it's very much informal, keep things very straight, whereas formalities there you can provide as much as needed. If you are sending the memo to several people, list them after this do, and if the list is longer than dozen's name, place it at the end of the memo and referencing it to the to line. So of course depends on the number. So if the number is getting even like this figure crossing even 12, then of course you can provide it at the end and provide a reference that it basically is a list of all those who are the actual or the direct addressee of this memorandum. Once you have decided what you're going to write into, you have to provide your own reference within the inner frame. Your own name, the writer's name, the professional title, your designation, go after this heading as well. Your name and your title. Even title itself refers to your name as well in case of any publication, so they ask for the title. So that title is of course your own name. Even account, you open account in a bank, in that case also they ask for the account title. That is of course your name. So this is basically the professional title that you use in case of a working organization. You provide it over here. from section containing the name of basically the sender. In case of an informal environment, the sender's first name will suffice. However, in case of more formal circumstances and situation, you have to use the full name as well to maintain that relation which exists between you and your readership. In case the receiver is in another department, which means you are also separate from that person's department, that means he or she does not know from which side you belong, better to provide your full name and the department's name. So that's how this also becomes very much essential. Usually not necessary to use Mr., Mrs., Miss again unless the memo is very formal. So hopefully you got the idea of how you're going to place the indicators of communication, the basic interlocutors having the conversation. Now once this is decided, we have to look at the significance of how date is very much important. Dating a memo gives the organization a record of its correspondence. So keeping a written account of all the activities, the manner in which they are happening and how they are happening, you basically require a date. It has to be placed. This point becomes important with special reference to date, that in order to avoid confusion between the British and the American date system, you simply can go towards writing your month as a word. January or Jan, of course, I would recommend January. But to give you an idea regarding this British and American date system, we have been following the British. Now I have started to come across the American system. The difference is that in case of a British date system, date is placed first, then month, then year. And that is totally the opposite of the American system, where the month is first, then your date, then the year. So that's why I said that I have been using, and even now I still prefer to use this British date system, because that is how I have been writing the date within my documents, be they official or in journal. But of course you use American as well, and in order to avoid the ambiguity, the better and the good solution of it is to mention the word. You simply write the month in the form of a word rather than mentioning it in numerical form. Moving onwards to the subject and how you basically decide it, how you basically write it, or what it refers to. You basically state the topic in few words, but make sure it simply communicates the basic point of the whole memorandum. It communicates everything. In short, of course, but it gives the message, reflects the theme of your memorandum. For example, changes in employee medical benefit is more specific, of course, as compared to employee benefits program. So you can see the difference even by reading these three words. You get an idea, but changes in employee medical benefit mean it's referring to changes. We're going to look into how you can make it more effective with the upcoming examples as well. The order and placement of these headings may vary from organization to organization. For example, 2-line eliminates the need for salutation. That is also very much important point. Regarding the order, it varies from situation to situation, from organization to organization, but these 4 components are essential. These are to be there. Whereas talking about the next point which has been shared, to just refer back to my previous lecture where I talked about this no requirement of salutation and the closing remarks, of course, in which you provide your own reference. The addresser provides the details. So when you have provided it at the top in the head, then that is the reason because of which they are not coming at the end and salutation is not coming at the beginning. That is why 2 eliminates the need of salutation, which is why you don't see these dear Mr. Bernstein and many other examples. So this is the point to be kept in mind, how it is related. Subject line. Now look at this bullet number 1 as it indicates that it is the first line or the first point of communication, because before it you're basically providing the date for a written account, who is communicating, but over here this is the first line which is conveying the meaning. Therefore it has to be very much important and has to be structured very carefully by including topic and a focus. What do I mean by the topic and what do I mean by the focus? The example is going to show you how you simply differentiate between a topic and a focus. Request for month-end expenditures. Your focus is the request, and what basically is being the subject of this whole memorandum is month-end expenditure. So this is basically the topic and the focus is the request. Now in general, as you're going to see as well, you may have these interaction in the form of memorandum with respect to a single topic. The focus may subject to change, but the topic can remain the same, as we will look into some other examples as well. A sample here for you, just to have an idea how memorandums are written and what is basically the template of Charles Sturt University. This is basically the structure. This is basically the CC section which is also added into it, and then you have this message. So hopefully you got an idea how you basically structure a head, and the message would go over here. Very brief section, it can go into a good length as well, but an example of some good authentic memorandum for you to understand how it can be structured. Now coming towards that important point. This is a subject which is written here in front of you. Vacation schedule for accountants. Now based on that same understanding which we have just studied, the topic and the focus. Accountant here becomes the topic. And why am I calling it the topic? Because the focus is the vacation schedule for these accountant. Your subject is your accountant, and anything with respect to these accountants or the subject is the vacation schedule. How it is going to change is something which you can find within the bullets as well. Over here we have some example as well. Salary increase for accountants or termination of accountants. In all these examples, you can also simply say and tell me that these are the topics, direct topics, or the subject matter which is being discussed, and the focal point is basically changing. Over here is the vacation schedule, or here is salary increase and termination. So that's why these two components are very much essential and should be there within an appropriate subject, and these should be clearly differentiated as well. If you have to write it, it should be written in such a way that you are in a position, if both components are there, you are in a position to simply separate them, and you are in a position to tell me as well that, sir, this is the topic and this is the focus. If they are well written, you would be able to divide them. If I can read the bullets as well for you. Accountant is the topic, and of course vacation schedule is the focus, the point which I have just explained. So the focus aids communication more than the topic. An important point to be noted. This topic of a memo, for instance, can stay the same while the focus is changing, as I have just shown you. In each of these instances, the topic is the same as I have mentioned, which is the accountant. The important thing is that your focus is basically changing. Huge differences are there between these salary increases, vacation schedule, and termination. This is the point to be focused here. Last, in addition to the identification lines, memos are initiated next to the from line. This is again a reference of the communication which begins right after this identification of who is basically the interlocutor. An interlocutor, the ones who are undergoing this interaction, the addresser and the addressee. Right after that identification, you are now in a position where the communication process has begun. So this, keeping that in mind, you have to structure your subject without making any error and keeping your focus and topic together to form the right subject. Once the subject has been written, then comes the stage of your message. The content of the memorandum should consist of a concise introduction, one or more middle paragraphs, of course for the details, and then a brief conclusion. So we have the intro, supporting details, and then a brief conclusion. The important point is they can be as short as a single paragraph or even less, just a single sentence. As we will see in the upcoming examples, they're just a single line. It depends on the objective. It depends on, basically, let me show you the point. Depending on the purpose and the nature of the audience, that will determine the length which has to be used. And keeping in view these factors, you have to structure your memorandum. Unless the memo is a brief note, well-organized memo message should contain the following sections. No, that brevity is kept aside, and now we are focusing on a detailed memorandum. If it is the one providing detail, what should it cover? What should be the important components, starting from providing a situation, an introduction, or the purpose. This is the basic component number one. Setting up a situation or a context, providing something why this becomes so important, why this memorandum is important, which is why I call it as purpose. Then you simply identify the problem, or of course you are well aware of the problem. You have to make your readers identify the problem. And this of course is optional depending upon the length of the memorandum. If it's a straightforward message, of course you do not require, but in case of a detailed memorandum, this becomes the option which has to be applied. For example, since the move to a new office, staff has difficulty in finding a nearby place to buy lunch. So you are basically highlighting a problem. If it's a problem solution, then you have to provide the problem and then recommend a solution. That's how the provision of a problem becomes important. And based on this problem, you have to provide a solution as well. The reason why writing optional is that it depends on type to type, and you have to determine which type you are using. Providing a microwave oven in the pantry, I'm over here in point number C, would enable staff to bring in their own lunch boxes and reheat their food. So you are coming up recommending a solution, and this solution is directly related to the problem which has been identified or highlighted within your memorandum. Once the problem solution is there, of course, we have studied the general structure. There is always a call to action, and this action has to be taken or has to be performed by your readers. Therefore, it will go in line with your solution. Once you of course provide the solution, that doesn't mean that having an awareness of that solution is enough or is all that you need. Of course, you require that action to be performed or action to be taken. Therefore, this may be same as solution or part of that solution that receiver needs to carry out, meaning you provide such statements as we would appreciate if you could authorize up to $3,000. So you have to make the other person perform an action, which is also part of the components. This is very much important. Again, goes in line with the element of consideration and courtesy. You have to respect, and for that respect, you have to keep your tone, your message, and use of word very much polite, respecting the other person's space. To avoid that receiver from refusing to take the action that you want him or her to take, it is important to end with a polite expression, and for that you use such as thank you for your support once again, or making it more informal depending upon the situation. Simple thanks would do the job. As we have this example, I also use the car booking app of Uber, and once I'm done with the traveling, I always receive this message of rating in addition to those 5 stars that I have to give. Now they have added another option in which we have to add some comments and to add a thank you note as well. So rather than writing it in detail, I simply use this thanks. So part of it, because it helps them to earn even more, they get profits, so that's why they always request us to do such a thing. But part of the game can be done. Just reminded me of where I use this expression of thanks, but it provides a lot of advantage. Over there they get the benefit in the form of points, the profits, and the other person is going to get respect if you are providing a thank you note at the end of a memorandum. Now looking at those sections, the manner in which you will be structuring your components which are coming one by one. You provide the basic summary, which is placed, of course, at the beginning of a memorandum, should be a means of condensing the subject to 5 or 10 lines. So now is the point where you have to condense the subject which you have mentioned at the very beginning in the form of a summary. 5 to 10 lines. You can of course go a bit up, a bit down, but the general convention is being shared for you to give it a try. Not contain any jargon or highly technical language. Of course, you're keeping things more comprehensible, and of course you try your best to initiate an action, and that action requires that everything that you are including within the content is easy to understand to initiate an action. Therefore, avoid the use of this technical language unless it's very much essential. The introduction. This introduction, of course, begins the explanation, setting up the background, providing the significance of the subject. So you have the space of providing some information which is very much needed for your readership. Let's look into the points. It basically states the purpose and scope. Why is it important? What can be the outcome? You may add a paragraph or two for the background, as I mentioned, if the reader needs it for the comprehension. So think of the nature of the audience and then decide whether it is needed, or you can simply focus on the main point. The introduction may also be used to ask or answer key questions. For example, you may be the one coming into the forefront with questions, or you may be responding to a memorandum in which some questions have been asked to you for providing a response. In that case, you may be addressing those questions, or you may simply come up with some questions which may be asked afterwards and then try to answer them through this channel. Thank the reader or give good news such as approval of the proposal. Now this is directly related to internal memo proposal, in which you are proposing something and now you have to respond. So that response should come at the very beginning, in which your approval should be there in the introduction. That approval should be there because that is how you need to show your professionalism, that of course if it's a good news, it should come at the top. On the contrary, if there is a refusal to a request or rejection of an offer, use this introduction to establish some reasons before saying direct no. This is once again related with the C of courtesy and consideration, that in case circumstances are not that much supportive of something to be applied as to be approved for funding or getting some grant, you provide first of all some set of reasons and then move towards saying a no. Of course, you don't say no. Saying this no means that you basically apologize that your application could not be processed, unfortunately, of course, and we are sorry for the inconvenience. You try to set up a situation in which you are trying to give the appropriate space to the other person, in which he or she may not be harmed, their self-respect is not harmed, and that is why the focus remains on providing reasons first and then moving towards the apology. 2 or 3 sentences that are orienting your reader about why you are writing to him or her is the point that should be there in your mind while drafting your introduction, providing the reason and developing the reader's interest. The next point to focus is that it shouldn't be editorial in which you are coming up with these philosophies. This is not the space of coming up with some philosophy. You should provide facts and figures, and that will maintain the objectivity, and this objectivity will make it more appealing and effective for your readership. That's why avoid using the editorial tone by the choice of words which are referring to some philosophy. Introduction basically should inform the reader about the specific background info regarding the project you are writing about. For example, who, what, when, where, and why. The WH. You have to keep these WH in mind, and that is how try to be more specific rather than making it generic, because that will cause the confusion, as mentioned in case of giving the philosophical references. In most analytical memos, your tone should be unemotional and objective. Once again, direct reference. These two are related. If you are being emotional, being subjective, and if you are being general, meaning you are avoiding the use of these emotions and providing points specifically with facts and figures, that means you're keeping your tone and language objective. Now this is an example for you how you have to structure it. Of course, it's a brief one, but the detail can also be written keeping these points alive. Explaining why you are writing, that will become your purpose. Stating what you are writing about, of course, becomes the subject. So the introduction of the subject should be there, of course, along with a proper background, in addition to the purpose, signifying or emphasizing the reason why you're writing. Now looking at the example here, to help me complete my monthly budget report, please send me a copy of your month-end expenditure. So why you are writing, becoming the purpose. This is basically the purpose, how it is so important. And what are you writing about is simply indicating the subject matter, and it is highlighted over here. Please send me a copy. So that is how you basically indicate, or that is how you structure your introduction, in which you clearly have the purpose alongside a subject, and together they form the appropriate introduction. The next stage is your discussion. Once you are done with this introduction, you move towards the next step of providing the details and how and what is essential. If we talk about providing the details or the discussion section, facts of a situation need to be accurately identified and presented, and the arguments need to be reasoned and supported carefully with, of course, the facts and figures. So all the points which you have mentioned while discussing the subject matter and the reason, of course, of writing the memorandum, now the subject matter requires details, detailed explanation, and that explanation can be provided if you are using facts and figures. This is the space where you have to use the tool of explanation of all the points which are relevant for comprehension to initiate an action. This is the place where you have to provide details within the discussion section. Another tool which have to be used is itemizing your needs for easy access. If you require something from the audience, try to provide it in this manner. Be sure to include the following expenses as you are using the bullets, as identified and emphasized in previous lectures as well, the manner these can be used. And even if there is a paper in front of me, rather than looking at each and every line, although if you ask me how many paragraphs, I can count it, but if you ask me what's there in it, it will take time. However, You simply ask what's there on the bullets. I will straight away look towards the bullets and I'll see this, this and this. Mileage, food, hotel room charges. This is the significance of using the bullets. And for easy access, that's how this becomes important and should be used especially in case of your discussion section. Once the supporting details have been provided, the next stage is of course the manner in which the analysis has been carried out. In case of a proposal, how it will be carried out. Before you engage in any analysis, you need to tell your readers some things. What are those things? You basically have to talk about the data. What data will you be using? How and where did you obtain the data? Then of course there is a need of referring to the methodology used. What methods will you be using to analyze your data? And then certain assumptions. If there are some assumptions which will either be negated or approved, will become first the presumptions with some proof, and then moving towards all those stages where we come to the conclusion that something is really authentic, that you make authentic by applying the scientific method. Hypothesis, experimentation, theory, again some testing, and then you get finally the law. I just gave a reference of that. But over here, even if there is some assumption or if there are some assumptions, you need to provide some details within these sections. This section of the analysis may also be labeled as your findings, your details and your results, because this is the place where you give a reference that you did the analysis and now you are providing all the results which you have gained as a result of carrying out the analysis, or something else that signifies that this is where you provide the details of your analysis. So it depends on how you are structuring your memorandum, how it has begun, and now what is needed. So it depends on situation and the manner in which you are writing. But these are the things to cover when we talk about the section of analysis. This is for the reader, of course, that needs more specific information than the summary info presented in the key points. So this is also something which you have to determine, that in case readers require detail, you have this space where you can provide explanation of the findings. That explanation coming within the discussion section was regarding the subject matter, to explain how that becomes so important and all the terms which are needed to be understood. This section is more with reference to your findings, your results, your data which you have achieved, and its explanation, the explanation of those results. Now if we talk about why this data and its reference is so much important, that it has to be included, as I mentioned within the previous slide. The thing is that most of the analytical reports require this incorporation of data in order to be convincing. Authenticity, reliability, and that is only possible if you are providing the data itself. If it's missing, how do you expect the other person to test it for verification, to check its reliability, and I'm getting the same results? That's why the incorporation of data becomes very much important, and that's why it has to be there. Again, another point to be noted in addition to point number A is that it gives this sense of objectivity, and that remains the focus of our whole discussion, that you have to keep and maintain an objective tone throughout your memorandum writing. And you of course encourage managing by fact. So everything you manage, the whole writing process, or you manage the procedure which you have carried out, maintaining the objectivity. And you maintain objectivity by carrying out this experiment with some clear statistics, and of course using a clear-cut, clearly designed methodology. You'll get some results, and if you provide those results clearly as they were revealed or they were obtained as a result of an experimentation, that means that you are providing things with facts and figures. and that means there is no element of subjectivity. You are providing things straight away as they are. Data are usually, of course, expressed in tables or graph, which of course is needed, gives this element of objectivity and authenticity. Therefore, you have to use these tables, and they can be placed inside the analysis section or at the end of report as attachments in case they are detailed. Again, giving you an example of my own dissertation, this was a situation in which I basically analyzed that data. Rather than providing it just to increase the number of pages, the good thing was to place it at the end. So it was the data which was basically analyzed was provided in the form of an appendices. So of course you have this example of providing details if they are not directly related for the comprehension of your procedure which you have carried out within the memorandum. You provide it in the form of an attachment. In either case, all tables, graphs should have the title and its numerical reference. Again, this reference becomes very important because wherever you are discussing those attachments, you should provide the reference so that if the person wants to see the detail, they should know where and at which site or at which heading they can find the appropriate information and its specific detail. That's why reference becomes important. Once the discussion, the analysis and the details within that analysis are complete, you move towards the final step, and that is of conclusion. And within this conclusion, you basically focus on summarizing the main points and discussing what action is required. A call to action, as I mentioned earlier within the previous examples and the previous discussion, is something to be achieved as a result of writing a memorandum. Therefore, this discussion on the main points should lead you towards this action, and action becomes also important, and you provide a hint over here in this section of conclusion. This was the point that I discussed earlier. The reason why it is written here is that after the conclusion, usually in case of a formal conversation, you provide your own reference. But the reason now this yours faithfully and complimentary clause cannot be used is that in case of your head of the memo, you have already provided the detail under from. So no need, and now it has to be eliminated in case of your memorandum writing. Talking about the use of initials, the initial that you place part of your signature, a short form indicating that yes, you take the claim and you accept the responsibility. So this is required for completing a memorandum and not the signature immediately after the last sentence. Usually you don't go towards providing the whole signature because initial does the job in most of the circumstances, but in case if needed, you can go towards the name and you can go towards using the signature, but generally your initial does the job. Then of course you focus on providing this list, the distribution list, to whom this thing has to be distributed. Names on the distribution list are usually typed in an alphabetical order. However, of course, you can go towards this ranking as well, ranking scheme, moving from highest to lowest. For example, over here, this statement is also written for you to remember and understand that if some individual outranks the other, you can place them first. So higher authorities are usually placed at the top, and then you move towards the lower strata. So it all depends on the conventions of your own organization. Then of course you simply provide the attachments, you list them at the top of the memo or the end, but the attachments become the essential part if they are directly related with your memorandum, part of your analysis. Too much lengthy, therefore they'll go at the end to avoid that element of length within the memorandum structure itself. Duplicate copy of the memorandum should be held for future reference as well. So this copy becomes important as well as an evidence that this action was requested, was simply communicated as an action or as a decision, as a reflection of a policy. So therefore you need this duplicate copy of a memorandum as well. Now just looking at the example, what to focus on when you are writing a conclusion. So your conclusion will basically state what's next and when you expect a follow-up and why the date is important. In order to set this background for initiating an action, then you need to provide, in addition to summarizing the points of your memorandum in case of a conclusion, you need to set this background for a follow-up, and then to actually initiate that action you need to provide this date and its significance as well. For example, please send your month-end expenditure by Wednesday at 3 p.m. Why? This will allow me to complete the budget report by John's deadline. So in order to really initiate the action, you have to provide this rationale, or call it as the reason why you are providing these deadlines. So when do you expect this follow-up, and why is this follow-up that important? For that you need to structure your conclusion or the end of your conclusion after summarizing all the points in this manner. Hopefully you got this idea as well. Now just look at the example here. We are looking at some of the examples now. Over here, this example clearly indicates that in case of a very brief memo, you can have this message which is as short as just a single sentence. The meeting on Saturday 25 August has been changed to room 101. Purpose is over. The rest of the details would be coming at the meeting, but the message has been communicated and it has to be as short as possible, and that's how you get the message with brevity. Again, you have the head, the subject, and the date. You look at this reference, the one that I gave you. To avoid that ambiguity, the writer within this memo has just used the first 3 letters of July, and it has does the job. It has simply done the job. That is how you can simply place the date. Now the example of a memo which is a little lengthy, because over here you find some detail. Over here once again you have the head, you have the subject, notification of my resignation. Itself very much self-explanatory. I'm writing to inform you of my intention to resign from an organization. And then now look at this pattern. Think of all the points which we have studied. I mention it, I remember it, hopefully you remember it as well. I mentioned that all the lines should start from the left. That's why they are starting from this point. This is the left area, this is the right area, and if there is something which has to be written at the center, so it will come over here. So all the things are there at the left hand side. The next thing to focus is the double spacing. Look at the spacing between these 2 lines. I am highlighting them to show you this white gap between them. It's a single spaced. And now look at this space which is there between I am writing to inform you and I have appreciated. So this is the difference. I have simply shown how you have to place and organize your lines, your paragraph, and your head and your body to give it a structure of a memorandum. This is basically a reference to the format, the manner in which we have studied it. And then of course you can give a detail reading to the example itself, the manner in which it has been structured. This is basically the extension of the same memo. You are, look at this example. It's a sad one, of course. That's why you are providing this thank you note at the end. And this is the significance of maintaining this courtesy that I talked about. You have to be courteous. You have to keep your message polite, and If it is polite, it is going to be effective. That is how this becomes important. That is how this thank you note becomes important. Another example of a memo in which you see the significance of headings and subheadings, the manner in which these have been used. You have this distribution of header. The subject has been clearly mentioned over here, and then you start with this introduction. You provide a background. Look at the spacing being provided, the spacing between these and the spacing which is there between the subject and the introduction. You have the background, and afterwards you have the advantages, you have the staff opinion, then you provide the cost. That is how you basically structure your memorandum in case it's a detailed memorandum, now becoming a bit longer. And of course you find the request over here as well. Request, or you call it as call to action. You want to initiate an action. If this meets with your approval, we would appreciate if you could authorize up to $3,000 for the purchase of this microwave oven. And then you have the signature along with the name. Again, why I've mentioned it here, initials can also do the job, but it depends on situation to situation. In case of this example, there seems to be a distance between two parties, which is why the tone is kept formal, which is why the use of name is going in addition to the use of signature. Now, just to give you an idea of how you can use Microsoft Office or Microsoft Word document to prepare or to draft your memorandum. So Microsoft Office has also made things quite easy but a bit tricky. Easy in the sense that you are going to get all the templates of memorandum. Even I tried it myself to simply be in a position to explain it in a better way to you as well. So what I did was that I just followed the procedure and now have it in written form as well, just for an awareness. These templates are there to help you, of course, to write memo in addition to letters, flyers and resumes. The formats are there. You can just simply give it a try. If you look at the latest version of the Microsoft Office, you can have even more enhanced and well-developed, well-equipped templates in which you just have to incorporate the data and you can have a very good written form. So you can simply access it by clicking on file, which is there. I'll show you it as well. Then scrolling to new and then clicking on the memos tab. And then inside this file, you can have all the different forms as contemporary, professional and elegant memos. So this is basically for you to look into and get aware of what are the standard templates of memorandum, and then you can just pick any one of them which suits your needs, and then you can write your own memorandum starting from, of course, these templates, and then you will be in a position to write even your own. You can structure it yourself, and based on the discussion which we had, I believe that you can just put it aside and you are in a position to write your own memorandum. You are well aware of the format and you know how to structure it as well. You know the types as well. You have to pick the right type, and after you have chosen one, you just have to start writing it. So that simple it is. So just and the one which I just extracted, once I open up the doc, basically this is the place where you find this button of file. You click over it, then you get a rundown in which you have to just select new. A new doc will open over there. They'll give you this bar in which you have to type memorandum, and all the templates would appear. I chose one because I liked it over here. It's clearly directly related to the discussion which we had in the previous lecture as well. So over here it could either be written as memo. Over here it's written inter-office memo, but otherwise in journal even the memo itself will suffice, and it clearly indicates that now you're about to write a memorandum, and this is basically the template. You have this header, and this is the place where you start typing and your text would appear. Depends whether you're writing a lengthy or a short one. just some images to give you an idea that once you are using this doc file, so within this Microsoft document, that is how you can even prepare your own head by starting from to, form, date and subject. Then of course that is how you write your opening segment. You can give it a reading as well to get an idea how it is structured. It has come into my attention that recently the staff room area has become, you are setting up a situation, so I do not wish to go into the detail. The basic purpose is set. You within this opening segment provide this background, which is basically the part of the introduction. This becoming your detail, this part basically in which you are providing the detail. In this discussion segment, you basically provide this argument, you provide these facts and figures to support the subject matter, to highlight its significance, and once it has been set, then you provide this summary. And this summary, as you know, is basically summarizing all the points and gradually leading you towards the end of the memorandum. You write it after providing some relevant discussion, and once you have provided the summary, then you move towards the closing segment, in which you gradually move towards this action and the manner in which it has to be taken. We think everyone will benefit from having a tidy and hygienic staff, so please make an effort for your fellow co-workers. So you find this hint of initiating an action, and that is how this becomes important. And finally, you give this call to action. After setting up a background, then you simply say, please clear out, label your food by 5 p.m. today. So that is how you basically set up a background, and once you have set it up, then you actually move towards that action which has to be taken. Just the images extracted for you to understand how it will appear in case of writing or preparing it in case of a Microsoft doc file.
Welcome back. Let's continue helping Dave understand memorandums. Last time we discussed the basics, purpose, and types of memorandums. Now let's describe how to write a memo. There are two frames to a memorandum, the outer frame and the inner frame. The format is the outer frame of the memo, which includes the margins, text particulars, and line spacing. The memo is always signed by the sender. It is possible that different organizations may follow their own memo format. The order of the recipients should be by seniority or alphabetically by last name. The memo should include the organization's name in the letterhead. The structure is the inner frame of the memo, which includes the head and the main message. The inner frame starts with the details of the recipient and sender, the date, and the subject line. The memo should have a strong subject line with a focus and a topic. Then comes the body or the message of the memo. Attention should be given to the logical flow of ideas between paragraphs. The body should convey the message based on the type of memo. Most memorandums deal with the situation. Particularly, the problem-solving memo outlines the problem and discusses its solution. If the memo calls for any action, then a polite request should be made at the end of the memo. The inner frame of a long memo will require some subsections. A long memo begins with a summary, which gives background information on the topic. The facts are presented in the discussion with required details. The data is analyzed in the analysis subsection, then conclusions are set, and the actions to take are explained. After the message body is complete, the writer's initials and the list of recipients are included. At the end, the number of copies and attachments are indicated. Always remember, the correct mixture of the why and the what in your report will give you the response you are looking for. Many templates are available online and through Microsoft Word for the format and structure of the memorandum. Now that the plan is set and all the information is disseminated properly through the memo, your business is flourishing and you are happy.
With this, I would like to come towards the conclusion, in which I can say that we have successfully covered the format of a memorandum. By it I mean the outer frame, and talking about the structure of a memorandum, in which we can say the inner structure, the anatomy of a memorandum, but now we know how we can structure it. I'm sure you would be able to apply it as well whenever the situation is here. You want to do this informal communication, just give it a try among your classmates as well. You can develop situations in which you can write it, and I'm sure you won't have any issue in case of memorandum writing. Then the upcoming sessions and lectures would be interesting, in which we are going to study some other different forms of writing, and we'll make sure it may not get jumbled up or chaotic. Rather, we'll be simply dividing it in a way that you know how to write each and every form of writing and where to use it. But till then, again, my message is the same: take good care of yourself, remember me in your prayers. Till then, thank you very much, and see you in the next lecture. Assalamu alaikum.